Okay, welcome back. This is the second video in this series of 10 videos. And in this video we're going to talk about power. We're going to talk about what is power. And there are several definitions for power. One of them is, well, you've got work and force, and you move something a certain distance with a certain amount of force, create a certain amount of work. Another definition involves voltage and amperes, or power is current times voltage. And you've got various other definitions of power. The ability to get things done, the ability to make things happen would be the more layperson's definition of power, where you're not using electronic theory or physics with work, force, and distance. So you have metaphysical interpretation of power also, which is similar to the ability to make things happen. It's basically using the forces of the universe and directing them toward a specific outcome. So it's taking the waveform of possibilities from the quantum realm and it's narrowing them down by, it's like collapsing the waveform into a point or particle, or what we call dominant timeline. So a real simple example of that would be, in the next moment there's a nearly infinite number of things I could do. I could pick up this bottle, I could choose to drink or not drink, I could move it to the left, I could move it to the right, I could put it back down, I could pick up another object, I could hold it, I could flip it up and down. There's nearly an infinite number of things I could do in the very next moment. However, if I simply don't focus on doing anything, then you could say, well, just about anything could happen in the next moment. But as soon as I set an intention to do something, I collapse this waveform of possibilities into a narrow frame of probabilities, such as it's highly probable that I'm going to pick up the bottle and take a drink. And then when I actually pick up the bottle and take a drink, then that's called the dominant timeline. Now we've collapsed it into a single particle, or what we call a dominant timeline. It's the recorded history now includes me picking up the bottle and taking a drink. So that's a rather silly example to describe what is called the uncertainty principle in quantum physics. Or in metaphysics, it has a lot to do with focus and intention. What you focus on, what you intend to create, what you concentrate on creating, what you direct your energy to creating, is ultimately what gets created. And this is called activating the timeline, or activating the possible and probable timelines. So now, instead of it being a possibility that I'll pick up the bottle and take a drink, it becomes a high probability because I've set my intention to pick up the bottle and take a drink. And then when I actually do that, it becomes part of the dominant timeline, or the linear timeline that gets recorded. Well, at this hour he picked up the bottle and he took a drink. So that's basic science of timelines. It's very basic physics. But it's also quite profound, because there are a lot of factors that go into determining the dominant timeline, or what actually manifests in this world that we've agreed is a real world. In our last video we talked about how we're not really perceiving the world the way it really is. We are simply interpreting what's out there, or what we think is out there, based on our physical senses and the way our brain encodes and decodes information. So keeping all of that in mind, we've all sort of agreed that we live in a supposedly three-dimensional world. In reality, it's much more dimensional than three, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll just call it the three-dimensional world. And there are certain rules and regulations that go along with living in the third-dimensional world. Oh, we have human bodies. Okay, that's one of the principles. There's gravity. We don't want to jump off a tall building if we want to stay healthy. Imagine how ridiculous it would be to get angry at God if we did fall off a building and hurt our body, and we say, well, it's all God's fault. He hurt my body. No, of course it's not God's fault. It's your fault for not observing the natural laws, the universal laws. And gravity happens to be one of those if we're here on the earth. And there's other laws and principles. The law of action and reaction, which is very similar to, in metaphysics, the idea that your thoughts create your reality, which is not the whole truth, but it is a valid perception. So if you think very intensely that you're going to pick up the bottle and take a drink, you end up creating that, and it started as a thought or an idea in your consciousness. I'm going to pick up the bottle and take a drink, and then I muster up the energy or the force and work moving over distance. So there's a force moving over a distance between where I am and where the bottle is, and then there's a force necessary to overcome gravity in order to pick up the bottle and take a drink. So this is a demonstration of power. It takes power to pick up that bottle. It weighs whatever it weighs, half a kilogram or whatever. And it requires I overcome the natural force of gravity to lift the bottle up to take a drink. So that's just, again, a silly example just to make our point about the elemental perception of what power is. So it starts with an intention, it starts with a focus, it starts with a determination to do something in what we call the external world. Now, you might say, well, that all sounds very obvious and very straightforward, so why then would we have problems creating what we want in this world? And now we're getting into the more complex questions. We're getting into the idea of free will, we're getting into the idea of individual consciousness and collective consciousness. Because if you all decided you were going to pick up that bottle, well, the first thing you'll notice is it doesn't take as much effort to pick up the bottle, because now we have maybe 3 people sharing the power to overcome gravity to lift the bottle. And so it's a lot easier to lift the bottle if 3 people are trying to do it instead of 1. So there's lots of examples of this in modern industry, where you have a group of people around an object in order to lift it, or a machine which does an even better job of lifting it. So, getting back to power. So power is the ability to get things done. And there's an idea of true power and false power. So let's define what that is. True power, the ability to get things done, exists within us already. We are powerful, creative, spiritual beings. In fact, it's been recently proven in physics that the entire universe exists inside each and every one of us. In religion, it says the kingdom of heaven is within. That is literally true. Science is saying the entire universe exists inside every proton of every atom, and there's trillions of protons and atoms within our own being. So we have access to all power, all energy, all information within us. So you might say, well, okay, that sounds great, but how do I tap into that power? How do I make it useful in my everyday life? Well, that's one of the things we're going to be exploring in this series of videos. We're going to really go deep into this idea of how to manifest the kingdom of heaven within, in the outer world, how to bring all this tremendous power and energy forth, how to direct that energy and power forth into the world. So, before we can just do that, we have to look at what's stopping us. If we don't look at the blocks, if we don't look at what's in front of us that's blocking our vision, we're going to continue to go around living in an illusory world of distorted perceptions based on the biggest distortion of all, which is the belief, I am powerless. Now, your thoughts are incredibly powerful, your beliefs are incredibly powerful, and I can prove it. What happens if you believe you're powerless? What do you get to experience? You experience being powerless. You have that experience because you believe in it. But what does that prove? It proves your beliefs are so powerful they can overcome this vast creative intelligence within you, the whole universe within you, and give you this experience as though you are a frail, helpless little human being with all these forces out here amassed against you. And so you just are this little helpless creature, and you're up against this big wide world out here that's so much bigger and more powerful than you. That's a belief system. That is not the ultimate truth. That is a belief system. And because you believe that, you've given it power over you. You've given the world power over you by believing it has power over you. So what about this so-called power elite? These beings who seem to have power over other human beings. You know, they've got armies and militaries and trillions of dollars or euros or pounds or whatever. And it seems like you're just struggling to make it in life, and maybe you're just barely paying your bills. Maybe you go off to a job you don't really like in some cases, and you don't feel very powerful. You say, well, they're the ones with all the power, jet setting around and controlling other people, you know, being the boss of large corporations, etc. But is that real power? Ask yourself once again a simple question which we posed earlier. If you are truly powerful, do you have a need to control and manipulate others? Do you have a need to oppress and enslave other human beings? If you are truly powerful, then first of all, you're not afraid of anyone. You don't have to defend yourself because you know that the power is within you right now. And so you don't have to amass great armies. You don't have to control and manipulate the media and spew propaganda all day long, which happens in virtually every country in the mainstream media, trying to convince people to think and feel and behave a certain way, because deep inside you feel powerless, you feel inadequate, and so you're making up for it with all this bravado, chest thumping, you know, let's have the one with the biggest sword, the one with the biggest gun, the one with the biggest bomb is going to win. All of this is false power. This is not the true power that's within you right now. So you need to recognize that the need to control and enslave and oppress others comes from a deep-seated belief in powerlessness, not from the recognition that you are a powerful being. So, as you start tapping into your true power within, you no longer have this need to control everything in your life. You stop being afraid of people and afraid of the future and afraid of this and afraid of that, because you recognize that the power of God is within you. Now, we know that it takes time to recondition yourself, to reprogram your subconscious mind to know that you are all powerful and all creative. Not just, oh, that's a pretty belief system. That really sounds good. Wow, maybe if I say a few affirmations, I'll manifest it. Well, it doesn't quite work that way, because you've been conditioned for a very long time to believe that you are frail and helpless, because when you came into this dimension, into this world, you automatically started identifying with your physical body, thinking that's who you are. Maybe you've got a mind and a personality attached to this body, but it's very difficult to remember that you are much, much more than that. So part of the purpose of my teaching, which will be reflected in this video series, is the idea that yes, you are a powerful, creative, spiritual being, and you have all these levels and dimensions of yourself that you have not yet tapped into. Or maybe you've had little glimpses of some of these higher dimensions of your being, but you have not been able to fully, consistently experience these higher dimensions of being. So as we go along, we're going to be taking two approaches to this problem. Number one, looking at everything that's blocking us or keeping us stuck in limited patterns of powerlessness. And two, we're going to be calling on the higher frequencies of our being. We're going to be focusing on our higher dimensional selves, or what we call our true self, authentic self. So we have to do both. If all we do is focus on the higher, then we don't really clear the negativity in our subconscious mind, and it keeps on creating negative results for ourselves because we're ignoring it, we're not dealing with it, we're not healing it. If all we do is focus on what's wrong and what's blocking us, then we get caught. We get lost in all the drama and trauma and stuff of our lives, and we forget that there's a higher picture. So we need to do both. We need to embrace the higher truths and call on the higher truths to come into our awareness, and we need to do our work on ourselves to clear our negative belief systems and our negative emotions, our programming and conditioning that comes from a myriad of past experiences, not just in this lifetime, but in other lifetimes as well. So it seems like a huge task, but in reality, the principles are very simple. At first, it's going to seem very difficult to overcome your negative beliefs, your beliefs in powerlessness. But it's like anything else. You start building a momentum, and the more you do the techniques and practices that are going to be presented in these videos, the more you're going to be able to start building this momentum, and eventually you'll reach a point where your subconscious mind, it becomes so full of the higher ideas of truth that the negatives become insignificant by comparison, and you do start manifesting more of your power in the world. So it's like the snowball slowly becoming the avalanche. So power is the ability to get things done. It's voltage times amperage in electronics. It's work, force, and distance in Newtonian physics. And in metaphysics, it is knowing that you are already powerful. It is simply a matter of directing that inner power in a conscious way. And so this is going to be part of what we will be talking about in our upcoming videos. We invite you to stay with us for the next section. We're going to look at many related factors to what we've already talked about. So we'll see you at the next video.